And welcome everybody to the Huddle, KGUN9's weekly streaming sports talk show. I'm Jason Barr, joined by Pat Paris. Pat, good afternoon. How are you?
Good. Great time of year. We got basketball rolling and we've got football as well.
Let's do two things at once here. Let's bring in today's guest, Ryan Hansen, Arizona men's basketball radio analyst. Hello there, Ryan. And at the same time, we're going to pull up our Huddle poll question. Ryan, we start every week with a Huddle poll question that we circle back to at the end of the show. And so we made one especially for today's topic and for you. Okay. And so it has to do with this. Does Arizona's 103-88 loss to Wisconsin change your outlook on this year's team? So you got three choices, right? Yes, can't give up 103 points. B, losses happen early season. Let's not make too much of a big deal of it. Or C, ask me after Duke. And so, Ryan, what I try to do is guess what Pat's going to answer. I usually get it right every time. And my guess for Pat is going to be B. Ryan, what say you?
I'm probably leaning closer to a B, only for the fact that you don't have any other qualifiers in there. I wouldn't say after Duke because there's still sample size is still too small for me. And a couple issues here, right? Tommy's never lost a game as an Arizona Wildcat head coach in November until Wisconsin, right? So are we going to the sky is falling? Are we going to give him a chance to breathe a little bit and maybe recognize that we think W's in March are far more important than W's in November, and we've owned November with Tommy Lloyd. So I'm okay. Let's give him time to teach.
Yeah, and what you're going to figure out, Rhino, on these poll questions from Jason is there's a little truth in all of them, right? Yeah, you can't give up 103. We get it. You certainly know a little bit more after the Duke game, but I went with B because that to me is the most of all three that I can really get behind. Is we just don't know enough about this team yet. Losses happen, maybe not to Arizona under Tommy Lloyd in November, but I think that can be a good thing. What's the old coaching adage? You learn more in a loss than a win. I think sometimes that can be true, and I think this time maybe it will be true.
I agree. Go ahead, Jason.
No. I was just going to say I take the other side and try to counter Pat. I went with C. Ask me after Duke because Ryan, if they give up 103 points to Duke, I think we've got a real problem here. No.
Well, and if you give up 103 points to Duke in McHale, let's add that piece in there. First road game, tough place to play. Let's be honest, the officiating was not a clinic in how to officiate college basketball in 2024, 2025. But I think you're right, Jason. If Arizona comes out and doesn't bounce back, doesn't show improvement, doesn't do better, for lack of a better phrase, maybe they don't win, but you can't. If you give up 100 points to Duke in McHale, you may have more problems than what you realize. I agree with Pat's point. There's truth in every single one of your responses.
Yeah, and this game goes different. I think it goes differently in a couple different ways. Maybe not quite as many fouls called, but certainly Caleb Love has got to learn, where that line is that you can't cross it. Having him get two quick fouls, one of them a technical, that just changed the complexion of the game to me right out of the gate almost.
You take out your preseason All-American essentially off of any team who's playing a Power 5 team on the road, and you essentially are playing shorthanded. Not to say that Arizona doesn't have enough weapons that shouldn't have overcome a bad game from Caleb on the court, a bad game emotionally, right? He disengaged. It did not. What was that? A 7-point play ultimately with the foul, the 2 free throws, and a 3 on the incoming the possession right after. That was not backbreaking, but boy, the snowball was rolling downhill. I have to agree, not only does Caleb individually have to find his center, find a way to impact the game in a way when maybe his shots aren't falling. That should be a maturity sign for him. But Arizona needs to find a way to win games when Caleb doesn't have that breakout game.
By the way, I should have mentioned that for viewers, you can vote on that poll on kgun9.com, and we'll circle back at the end and show the results. Ryan, Duke coming in, Cooper Flagg. How do you expect Arizona to try to guard him? Who's going to get the brunt of that matchup? And what are your expectations there with him coming to McHale Center?
I'll answer your question with a preface. Duke has far more than Cooper Flagg, and I know you recognize that. Clearly the #1 high school recruit. most likely the number one pick in the NBA draft. He will draw plenty of attention, and he is a bit of a unicorn, right? 6'10", can stretch the floor, can put the ball on the deck. So you have to have somebody who has enough size to impact a look from the perimeter. You have to have somebody athletic enough that can move their feet to guard a dribble penetration out of Cooper Flag. And does Arizona have enough of that? I think it's going to be by committee. I think you're going to see the kitchen sink, relatively speaking, thrown at him. It's not going to be a box and one type situation where Arizona is going to try to take him out of the game, but I could see KJ Lewis guarding him for significant periods of time. I could see Henry Vasar guarding him. I could see Tobe Awaka utilizing maybe some physicality against Cooper, but because he plays multiple positions, Cooper Flag, it's going to require multiple defenders. He could be the small forward in many lineups. So 6'10" versus KJ Lewis. I like KJ in that matchup. To be honest, I think KJ's strength, his athleticism, his smarts and intelligence, his effort and energy. I like that's going to be a fun matchup, and that is an NBA matchup for KJ, right? I think your NBA scouts probably will be looking at that to see, can KJ guard bigger, longer guys, because that's who he'll see in the NBA. But beyond that, we can talk more about the Duke roster because it is chock full of great talent.
Yeah, it is. Cooper Flag, by the way, doesn't turn 18 until December 21st. So
That's
another
the
one of
other
those.
piece, right?
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
young,
He's
young.
young. He's young for
Well, I
sure.
didn't realize that. Does that mean he has to play 2 years at Duke before he's 19 and eligible for the NBA draft then?
I don't
You
know.
have to be 19. I didn't realize he was a
You'll
year
have to look
younger.
that up. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know it's he's 17 years old, not till December 21st.
All right, let me reach out to our research department.
Yeah,
here.
get on our crack staff to figure this out, Jason.
We'll look it up real fast.
Hey, Ryan, I want to ask you about, just the overall. I mean, there's so much excitement leading up to this game. It's unfortunate that both teams, have losses, Duke to Kentucky and Arizona to Wisconsin. So it will be that top 10 matchup. But regardless, it's going to be, an event on Friday night. I think the buildup's already there. We've seen a few of these in recent years. I remember Tennessee a couple of years ago, even Wisconsin last year. But this is Duke. I mean, it's just different, isn't it?
It is different. You look at the last 30 plus 35 years of Arizona's modern basketball history, and you could probably count on one hand the number of games that probably had this hype. 2 or 3 of them had Duke in them. I think of when the Fab Four came to McHale in 1993-94. That had a ton of hype. It was right after Chris Webber left. They still had, the national championship game appearances, and the four were still intact. I think of when North Carolina came in, I think 2007, 2008, I think that season. Arizona wasn't as highly ranked and as good going into that game, but it was still North Carolina. So when you think of non-conference opponents to grace the hardwood here, there's not too many teams that are going to top those games. And Kansas came in a couple of times, highly, highly ranked. Outside of those teams, I can't think of a game non-conference that has as much excitement. And especially when you think of, and you named a couple of good games, really nice teams. But there's been a drought for this level of non-conference teams to come to McHale. I would say the last one that is at that level was Kansas and Carolina in the late 2000s when they came in. So you're going on 15 years since it's been a team of this caliber, hype, and excitement.
By the way, Cooper Flag is eligible by 10 days. If he was born in January, it would have gone to the next year.
That's how it works.
Yeah,
okay.
But it is. We just had our research staff look that up. I did feel a different buzz in the arena, Ryan, when UCLA came a couple years ago and both teams were highly ranked. It definitely felt different in McHale. And I hope there's that feeling too. I know it's a little bit of a later start for our TV reasons at 6:00 when we're doing possibly a live shot. It may not be that way at 6, but I do hope you feel that kind of buzz in the arena that I felt for that UCLA, and maybe even bigger because this is a team that we haven't seen so in a while. They did play last year in Duke, and they played in a holiday game about 10 years ago. But I think one of the great memories certainly is what Derek Williams did in 2011 and how they were dunking over Duke. I think that's got to be one of the top memories in Arizona basketball of maybe a non-Final Four game or a non-Final Four team of what happened in the second half and just taking apart Duke there.
Yeah, if you think of a singular moment from the Sean Miller era, that probably just captures a decade of moments in that one play. And for many fans, I think there's a hatred for Duke for multiple reasons. Duke is exceptional. The program has been, unfortunately, for me, a Wildcat fan. I can't believe I'm saying this. It's really been the standard for excellence across the board. Arizona could rival Duke in regards to in-season success, preseason tournament success, NBA draft picks. Arizona takes a second chair, but not by a lot. You look at what the fan bases are all about, the fraternity of past players that are connected to their program. I would say Duke's up there. UCLA's got a pretty decent fraternity. Arizona's fraternity is unrivaled outside of those handful of programs. The Duke Brotherhood that they call it, I think the Arizona alumni would have something to say about that with our connectedness from the Lute era all the way through Sean, and now Tommy's got a ton of great NBA talent on the floor. So you add all of those components to it, it does make for a tinderbox of excitement and buildup.
Who do you think Dick Vitale's going to be rooting for?
Oh,
I'll stay neutral on that one. If I channeled my inner Lute Olson, I know exactly what his response would be. Duke Vitale would be his exact response, probably, to that. But yeah, no love lost when you throw in some of those other characters throughout the years.
Yeah, for sure. Let's look beyond the Duke game, because we haven't had a chance to really talk to you about this season. A lot of people make look at this roster and say, "Oh, this is so deep, and there's so many players." And while that might be true, you and I talked about this, I think, before the Old Dominion game. The roster looks great, but are they going to come together? Are the pieces there? Are they missing pieces that we'll soon find out that will prevent them from making a deep tournament run or even a Final Four appearance? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Pat, we've talked about it. Many experts have thrown it out there. Is this Tommy Lloyd's deepest team? Is it the best? Did Tommy fill every hole? And in some respects, on paper, I think he did. But I think the Wisconsin game illuminates a couple of things that I was concerned about. One is, defensively, was this going to be the best team? Individually, there's still some great defensive players with KJ, Jaden. I think Tobe Awaka is holding his own defensively. But collectively, could this be one of the best teams Tommy's had defensively? There was a lot of people that said absolutely before the season started. After the first two games sounded good. You don't give up 103 points to your opponent and foul them as much as we did if you are an elite level defensive team. Can they get there? Remains to be seen, Pat. Just what we said. One of the other things that I questioned, and I still question, and the Wisconsin game points it out, outside shooting. Does Arizona have enough perimeter shooting to be able to go deep in March? 4 of 23 at Wisconsin does not give me a whole lot of confidence in a one-game scenario. So I need to see more of that. Can Arizona be a consistently good three-point shooting team? And I want to point out one interesting number, very interesting number from the Wisconsin game that I don't think I've seen in any reporting. Arizona registered the lowest number of assists as a team in the Tommy Lloyd era, 6.
Yeah, Jaden Bradley, I don't think had any.
Yeah, only one other time in Tommy's career at Arizona did they have single-digit assists. Only one time, 9, in a loss 2 years ago at to Washington State. So you think about that. Arizona's had double-digit assists in every game Tommy Lloyd has coached, and they only had 6. They still scored 88 points, augmented by a lot of cheap whistles and some fouls, right? 28 free throws of their own right, but a lot of maybe one-on-one, a lot of just get it and go. That's an opposite way of approach for Tommy. So how does he work with that? How does he bounce back from that from an offensive standpoint? I just think that number jumped off the page at me when I was looking at the stats of the game.
Well, and that's the hallmark, right? Is the assists in a Tommy Lloyd team and their points per possession, and it wasn't there in that game for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
There is another interesting non-conference matchup that could happen in a little bit that's not talked about that much, because the Duke game, you know where I'm going here. The Duke game is coming up here, and then the one I'm about to talk about may not happen. Depends upon what the deal is. But, Tommy Lloyd in Arizona could be going up against Gonzaga in the battle for Atlantis. He did not want to go up against Gonzaga a few years ago. I believe they canceled the matchup or something like that. He also didn't want to go up against his son, who's now with the team, even when he was at NAU, or a year or so ago. What do you? Anything? Just curious if you've heard anything about that potential matchup, or is that not really being talked about just because they've got Duke coming up here and that game may not happen.
I think you're right. I think Duke on the porch, right? It's right in front of you, and the Gonzaga. A couple games have to fall perfectly in place for Arizona as well as Gonzaga for them to face each other. It's a couple interesting storylines in the Bahamas. That's the number one storyline, I think, is Tommy having to face Gonzaga. It's gonna happen, right? They're gonna see each other either in the NCAA tournament or one of these tournaments. And I say it because I don't think Tommy and Mark really want to schedule a non-conference game like the Patino father-son game that just happened where it was intentional. Those are hard games. Those are not easy games for either coach. It's great for us media folk. It gives us another storyline to talk about. But I don't think Tommy's looking forward to that first time matchup. It's really not a fun one for him to have to go into. For us, I think it's great. It's great storylines. That's the number one storyline for the Bahamas. Number two for me is Tommy versus Umar. So you could see Arizona, Indiana, which would be a rematch of Umar Ballo, Kanan Carlisle, and Miles Rice. You could have three guys that have Arizona connections because of the Pac-12 games with Stanford and Washington State transfers, adding a little flavor to an Arizona Indiana rematch from a couple of years ago in Las Vegas. The third storyline, boys, no one wants to talk about it. Arizona is 0 for the Atlantis. Last time we were there, 0 for 3. And different era, different time, under significantly challenged circumstances with the FBI situation. But typically Arizona fares very well in these non-conference preseason multi-team events, as they've been come to known by. If it's Maui, if it could go back to the Great Alaska Shootout, the coaches versus cancer, preseason NIT.
Nick Johnson
Arizona
being
does well.
Nick Johnson being Saint Nick on Christmas Eve.
Mm-hmm.
But
exactly.
I know what you're talking. I know what you're with the game-winning shot. I know what you're talking about, though. That was the DeAndre Ayton, Rollie Alkins, Alonzo Trier year where they went from top 5 to out of the top 25, losing 3 games in Atlantis. And then afterwards, Sean Miller said, well, how we played in the first game was probably how we're going to play in all 3 games. Yeah, that was
because you don't have time to work on anything. You lose that first game, you're in trouble.
And none of those players, I don't think there's anyone associated with the program that is still around except for maybe the trainer and me. And I would say Brian Jeffries, but he's going to be in Tucson preparing for the Territorial Cup football game. The basketball broadcast play-by-play man will be his son, Brody Dryden. So there will only be a couple of us that have those nightmares of the Imperial Arena at the Atlantis Resort.
Murph wasn't the associate coach. He wasn't back by then. I guess not.
No, I don't think he was on that staff.
No, I don't think he was. He was. By the way, Umar Ballo is shooting 60% free throws right now after 3 games. Just thought I'd throw that out there.
Hey, Jaden Bradley was 7 out of 13 from the line. 60%.
I know that's another thing. And I don't want to harp too much on that loss, but when Wisconsin goes 41 of 47 from the line and Arizona goes 28 of 40. That's not a great field goal or free throw percentage there. You'd like to see that come up. And now that Umar Ballo's gone, you'd expect that to come up a little bit more.
Yeah, when you look at the roster and you look at what these guys have done statistically, at least last year, let's just take last year. I think the top 8 guys in the rotation, if you take out Conrad and Carter Bryant, who didn't have college stats last year, I believe every single one of them is north of 70%. And as season stats from last year, this year not as much. So I would have expected this team to be a very good free throw shooting team, and I think they will be in time. But my sister is going to be thrilled that she gets mentioned in the huddle here. But it was after the Old Dominion game. She goes, because free throw shooting was a little bit of a challenge in that one too. She said it's going to cost us a game. Did it cost us the game against Wisconsin? Maybe not. But if you go, 35 of 40 instead of 28, does the game change because it's closer? And you're right,
That's right.
Pat.
That's right.
the free throw line is critically important. I expect us, and I almost plan for us to be a good free throw shooting team because of the larger sample size of what these guys have done, last year leading into this year.
Remember, they tied that game at 64 in the second half, and you thought, okay, and then it just kind of more of the same.
And had the ball too. They had a possession, I think, 2 times to take the lead and turned it over both times. So those momentum swings in college basketball are monumental, right? That barrier mentally for both teams of who can take the lead. That could have been a watershed moment if you take the lead, especially in college athletics.
Yeah. All right, let's finish it up with Ryan Hansen here on the Huddle. I'm Jason Barr with Pat Paris by putting back in our Huddle poll question. Let's see how fans voted. Does Arizona's 103-88 loss to Wisconsin change your outlook on this year's team? And you can either vote yes, can't give up 103 points, no, early season losses happen, or C, ask me after the Duke game. Let's take a look and see if we can see how people are voting so far. Early voting. You can vote on kgun9.com. Do we have any results so far? No results.
I don't see them so far.
I don't see any results. I know we've got a few. I saw some early ones up. It was kind of mixed in B and C. And
I have it up right now, Jason. I'll just tell you, 23% say yes, can't give up 103. 30% nah, losses happen. 47% said ask me after Duke. So plenty of time for people to. There it is. Now it's changed a little bit. Now it's changed a little bit since
I'm curious, guys, what people on the ask me after Duke, does that mean if Arizona wins, they're going to feel better? Or is it a win or go home type feeling for them?
Right.
What if you play well and lose?
So as somebody who voted that way, what my thinking is okay, I was really pumped about this team. I mean, the eye test in the first couple games, I know those opponents were actually kind of beat before they walked in the gym, it looked like. Okay. But I was really pumped about, this is his deepest, best team. Look what they did. And so what I want to say is, okay, if they beat Duke, that to me erases a little bit the Wisconsin loss. But if they look like they did against Duke, against Wisconsin, yes, it does change my outlook from positive to negative. That's how I wrote the question.
That's where I was teetering between B and C because of what you just said. I'm not looking for if Arizona wins, I feel better, and if they lose, I feel worse. There's so much nuance here. Let's not forget, Arizona beat Duke last year in Cameron, and Duke went to the Elite Eight. Arizona went to the Sweet 16. Who beat Duke to go to the Final Four? NC State.
Oh, that's right.
So NC State, a win at NC State, who cares? And so I caveat all of this. That goes back to, I think, Pat, you and I, and not to say that our opinion has heavier weight than yours, Jason, because I think you brought up some great points. But the November euphoria that Arizona is typically used to seeing, Arizona winning the Maui Invitational 2 years ago, lost in the first round. Okay, so how did you feel after you beat San Diego State and Creighton? San Diego State went to the Final Four. We lost in the first round. How does that make you feel from November to March? So that's why I want to step back, right? Let's let the team breathe. Let's let them grow. With that said, by golly, please beat Duke, because I hate those guys.
Yeah,
I
agree.
To let a little fan come out.
I agree, but real quick, I know we're against time here, but real quick. These are the kind of games that win or lose at Wisconsin, win or lose home to Duke. These are the games that are going to matter when you're playing Kansas in late February, early March, or Iowa State late February, and get you ready for then the NCAA tournament. Would you agree?
Yeah, trust me, when Houston comes to town, we'll feel better that we've played Duke. Yep. When we have to go to Iowa State and Kansas in back-to-back Saturdays leading into the Big 12 tournament, don't think that loss at Wisconsin doesn't resonate a little bit of like, we've been on the road, we've been in a hostile environment. I mean, they were celebrating their 2 Final Four teams that, oh, by the way, got to the Final Four by beating us both times. You think that roof was like going up and down during that game? Absolutely it was, because of that environment. So it is, Arizona will be better regardless of the outcome Friday for playing this game.
You're well put.
Good stuff. Ryan Hansen, Arizona men's basketball radio analyst. Would love to have you back, of course, later in the year and get your insights as well. Really appreciate it. Well done. And,
thanks, Ryan.
We'll see you Friday night.
Enjoy the games for us. We'll see you Friday. Enjoy the game. All right, that was Ryan Hansen, Arizona men's basketball radio analyst. What was he talking about there, Pat? Your opinion means more than mine? What?
No, he said not necessarily that it means more, but yeah, it does. No, I'm kidding. No,
no, listen. I got to take the other side here. They're called fans for a reason,
Sure, they're
And also,
fanatic.
in most of the
Fanatic.
country, college basketball is a 1-month sport. This is
Right.
the exception here.
Right. Right.
And a lot of the country, this is, wake me up in March,
Right.
No,
No, there's no question. There's no
and
question.
it captivates the
Yeah.
nation. Right. So if you're an Arizona basketball fan, I totally understand. You're saying, listen, I'd rather get to the Final Four and lose a couple games early than go 20-0 and then not make the Final Four.
Yeah, that's we've seen it. We've seen that the last few years. Getting a 1 or a 2 seed is really great, but it does not, guarantee future success. Right? The old financial adage: just because you're a 1 or 2 doesn't mean you're going to be in the Final Four. And I'd rather see Arizona take their knocks and be a 4 seed and be playing their best basketball in March. And that's, to me, is the way they did it when they won their only national championship, and it's going to have to be the way they do it again.
All right, let's just spend the last 2 or 3 minutes here on the Arizona football team, which broke its 5-game losing streak with a win over.
Yes, and looked
Houston.
Terrific doing it.
I also, Houston looked terrible. I mean,
there's no question.
Yeah.
But remember, Houston just beat Kansas State.
Yeah. So here's the Tyler Loop 62-yard field goal to break the school record. So here's what I'll say. Brent Brennan has been heavily criticized. Some of it he really deserves, others a little bit, some bad luck. But if you're going to really criticize him for what has happened this year, we got to give him credit for this win, because I'll tell you what, and this is kind of a weird stat, they are 3-0 this season when they have not played the week before, meaning they have more than a week to prepare for a game. Okay.
Right.
They're 3-0, and they're 0-6 when they've played the week before, and now they're playing an FBS team. So I'm taking out the NAU game, which they won and did not look good at. Okay,
sure.
So they're 3-0 off a bye week or to open the season, and 0-6 when they've played the week before. How much and good coaches went off a bye week. Now I wonder, this could just be good. This could just be coincidence and an opponent. But your thoughts on that stat?
Well, and that's why, remember, I brought that up last week on the Huddle. I said, don't underestimate the coaching staff being able to come up with a game plan to take care of a Houston team that's got a lot of confidence coming off winning against Kansas State, because they did the same thing against Utah when they went up there, and Utah was ranked 10th or 12th, and they shellacked Utah. And it was both times, Jason, it was defensive performances that were the real surprise, the pleasant surprise, and that's how they they talk about complementary football. And complementary football is 3 phases, right? It's special teams, it's defense, and it's offense. And we talk so much about offense. But when you get Tyler Loop kicking a 62-yarder, you get even the punting pinned him deep once. Then you've got a defensive performance that bent a little bit at times, but only gave up the field goal. Then you get the offense that finally started really churning there in the second half. And I think that's the key. So, yeah, you have to give this coaching staff and Brent Brennan credit. The key will be, though, can they come back against a TCU team that's been a little up and down, but certainly has a little bit of pedigree, and they have to go there. It's never easy playing on the road, and we'll see. This team, the formula is there, Jason, for them to play well. We just haven't seen it in back-to-back weeks.
We talk about the buzz that's going to be at McKale Center for this Duke game. If Arizona somehow wins on the road to beat TCU and ASU beats BYU, wow, well, there'll be a lot to play for in the Territorial Cup game. You'll have a buzz in Arizona Stadium, and you'll have a sold-out stadium for that, because you'll have a 5-6 Arizona team playing for its season with a possible bowl game, trying to spoil ASU going to the Big 12 title game in their first season.
Right.
That will be. This season right now, the word I used last night on the air was salvaged. They salvaged the season so far, and they can salvage it again by beating TCU here and going up and getting to 5-6. But that would create, I think, a great Territorial Cup matchup.
Yeah, it certainly would. Right now, I'll be honest, Arizona State scares me. They're playing the best of anybody in the Big 12 right now. You just have to, as you always talk about the eye test. The eye test tells you they're the best team right now in the Big 12. We've seen BYU really struggle last couple of games.
Well, and they have BYU home, right?
Right. right.
Yeah.
And then we've seen Iowa State drop a couple games. We've seen Kansas State really struggle lately too. So now
Colorado's up there.
I think Colorado's right there too. And you're right. Colorado maybe Colorado's playing slightly better than Arizona State, but well, that would be a heck of a game between those two. We'll have to see if that is what the Big 12 championship game. But first things first, Arizona State's got to be BYU, and more importantly for us, Arizona has got to be TCU to, as you say, salvage their season by getting at least a chance to get a 6th win. But you got to get your 5th
if all you're doing is playing spoiler against ASU, okay, I get it. There's something there, and U of A fans hate them. It's the whole deal. I get it. But you want to have something to play for yourself.
That's right. Right. Yeah. The role of spoilers is fine, but it's a consolation prize.
Right.
You want an actual prize.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, last point here, because we got to run. There's a big difference going to, if you're coming off a 10-win season like Arizona, okay, there's a big difference if let's just pretend it's the New Mexico Bowl, right? There's a big difference going to the New Mexico Bowl off a 3-game winning streak when you thought the season was toast than off a 3-game losing streak when you're bummed to be going to this game. Right. So, it's all the journey and how you get there. All right, we'll deal with that next week. But for now, I hope everybody enjoys the Duke game. We thank our guest, Ryan Hansen, here on the Huddle for his thoughts previewing this game, top 20 matchup between the Wildcats and the Blue Devils at McKell Center. For Pat Paris, I'm Jason Barr. This has been the Huddle, a KGUN 9 streaming talk show. I'm not sure if we're going to be back next Tuesday, but we're definitely not done for the year. So we'll see when you see you. And thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time.